We begin our journey into the video Nasties with a little-known horror movie known as Absurd. Released in 1981 and directed by Italian exploitation master Joe D'Amato and starring George Eastman, the film is a spiritual sequel to another film on the video Nasties list, Anthropophagus. Unlike a lot of films on the Nasties list, Absurd comes with a whole list of alternate titles that you can find the movie under. It's also known as Anthropophagus 2, Monster Hunter, Horrible, or, if you can find it, under the title of Zombie 6. The film was released in the United Kingdom under the title of Absurd. Why so many alternate titles, you might be wondering? Well, that's something I can go into another time, but to put it simply for now, it was essentially an attempt to make as much money out of the product as possible and to keep it on the market. And a lot of films on this list will have a lot of alternate titles, especially the ones that were made in Italy. A lot of people call this the Italian Halloween, and I can see why. Like a lot of other slasher films that came out at this time, the film tried to exploit the popularity of the genre and sort of follow the Halloween formula. It's this big, unstoppable creature, going after this family. It follows a formula, but then just completely out of the blue, just hits you with an ending that we'll get to. So while I could just sit here, label this as a Halloween ripoff, end the review right here and move on to the next episode, that wouldn't actually be fair to the film, as unlike Halloween or other American-made slashers at the time, Italian filmmakers such as D'Amato weren't afraid to push the envelope when it came to gore, because it helped them sell their movies. So let's see what was so bad about this movie that made it get banned and burned by the British government. The first thing you may notice when watching this film for yourself is that Joe D'Amato is not credited anywhere as the director here. That's because he's using the pseudonym Peter Newton in the case of directing this film. Again, to put things in a really quick way here, rather than going into a full explanation of why this was done, it was a common thing within the exploitation subgenre of film, and especially in Italy. A lot of directors that did exploitation films either didn't like their names being attached to these movies, but did them because they had to, or they did it for legal reasons of some sort. Maybe they were afraid of getting hit with copyright infringement or something along those lines. The film begins with a dramatic chase, and right off the bat, you're left asking yourself who these people are and where we are and why they're chasing each other. And it doesn't help that we get cuts between the chase and a girl drawing circles over and over again within her room, all while a sassy 80s riff is playing over the entire thing. We're introduced to Katya, an unfortunate girl who I can only assume has been paralyzed by some sort of accident. It's never really explained why she's stuck in bed, but her mother does say she'll be able to get back up someday soon, so we can only assume it's not a permanent affliction. We get a quick shot of what I can only assume is a lunatic of some sort, or a madman. He's played by George Eastman in this movie, trying to escape some sort of mental institute, only to find himself impaled on the spikes of the gate as the priest that's chasing him tries to pull him down. The madman, now impaled and extremely injured, finds himself at the door of Katya's family, where both intestines and blood spill out, and he's sent to the hospital for life-saving surgery. It's here where things start getting a little supernatural. As the doctors work on the lunatic and try to give him surgery, it seems for a moment that they were not able to save him through the surgery as the heart monitor comes to a stop. They give him a shot of adrenaline to start his heart back up, and the doctors are left absolutely dumbfounded as it seems that no human should have been able to recover as quickly as this man has.
It's absurd. Completely absurd. Recuperative powers like that simply don't exist.
A tribute to your skill, Doctor.
I'd like to accept the compliment, Emily, but I can't. You were there, and you saw what happened. He started recovering on his own before I even had a chance to begin the heart massage.
Yes, I saw, but what I remember are his eyes. For a minute, I thought he was really conscious.
A nervous contraction. Or at least, let's say, that's the only explanation I can come up with. What I'm remembering is how quickly his blood coagulated while I was operating on him. It's something I've never seen before in my life.
We're then introduced to one of our heroes of the movie, a police officer who came to interview the family about the man that had collapsed at their door. Everybody's written him off as dead and has no idea what's going to be in store for them for the rest of the evening. Immediately cut to the priest, played by Edmund Perdam, who is stumbling through the forest, is suddenly stopped by the same police officer who I assume is making his way back to the station. After asking him for a little bit about his ID, the officer eventually gives the priest a ride, and it's this scene where you can tell how much Joe D'Amato wanted people to think this was shot in America, because he makes sure that the characters talk a lot about American football.
Well, it's lucky you bumped into me. There's no one out tonight. They've all gone home to watch the game. It's a big night. The Rams and the Steelers for the championship. Get in. I'll see if I can find you a mechanic.
Oh, it's very kind. Thank you.
You like football? American football, that is.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The weird editing in this film leaves me really confused, because this detective we see in 3 different places immediately, one after another. They did not spare any expense into transitional shots. First we see him in the house, then we see him in the forest with the priest, then we see him immediately in the hospital finding out about the man they had taken in, discovering that he's from some Greek island somewhere. The doctors go in to check on the lunatic, who seems to their astonishment has finally recovered from the surgery which has happened just 2 hours ago. It's here where the lunatic finally awakens. He spots the priest who has come to the hospital with the detective and starts to go insane with rage. Sort of similar to how Michael Myers would react to Dr. Loomis. The doctors manage to restrain him after the priest is pulled away to be interrogated by the police. It isn't long, however, before we get our first death in the movie. The lunatic is fully healed and awake with a nurse left alone in his room. He attacks the nurse and kills her with a surgical drill tool. Now, for the time, with the extreme close-ups and the lack of cutting away, I imagine this may have been seen as gruesome. The quality of VHS tapes and their grittiness probably didn't help this scene when they were being reviewed by the government, but needless to say, nowadays it looks hilariously fake. You can tell that this is not in any way, shape or form going to affect people in any way. Meanwhile, the priest is getting interrogated and is giving no answers when they find out about the dead nurse. The lunatic has escaped and goes on the run. Meanwhile, during the priest's interrogation, we find out the lunatic, named Mikos, is the result of some sort of scientific experiment where he can regenerate wounds at an amazing rate, and was driven insane as a result from the experiment. From this point on, the threat of Mikos is a point throughout the entirety of the film, as we're quickly given our second killing in the movie, and another likely reasoning for it being banned by the British government. What the point of this scene was, just to be there, like by the looks of it, maybe a selling point. It is an exploitation movie after all. This murder scene isn't like Halloween, where Michael stumbles across some random teenagers, stabs them in the back, and then walks away. We get a long close-up shot of Mikos pinning this man down and directing his head into a saw blade, complete with sputtering blood and a close-up of the man screaming in agony. I imagine the government had a field day with banning this film. They had every excuse they needed right here in this scene alone. Personally, I'm not affected by it, and I don't think the film deserved to be banned just because of this scene. Didn't even deserve to be banned in the first place, but if the government needed an excuse, they had one right here. The detective seems down on his luck as his attempts to get any backup are met with complete failure, as it seems the majority of the force, including the captain, are out watching the football game. How important does a football game have to be in order for the police captain to just ignore the fact that there's a mad serial killer out on the loose? Hey chief, we need help destroying this practically unkillable madman. Oh, sorry pal, can't do it. It's the Rams and the Steelers tonight. Instead, the police settle for the only team they can muster up: the veteran detective, the young, inexperienced rookie, and the priest. Now, take it from somebody who watched the movie, they were as useless of a team as they sounded on paper. The detective hands the priest a gun, and the team essentially go their separate ways. Mikos is back on the open road when a biker gang is making their way along the road. I thought I might mention there was a point earlier in the movie where we did see this biker gang, but just like this scene, their appearance in this movie is pretty pointless other than to set up a kill. The scene we saw them in earlier in the movie, they were harassing some drunk homeless man, so I guess this second time around we're supposed to root for Mikos, or maybe root for the fact that they're getting what they deserve. Like, who's the bad guy here? The killer or the asshole bikers? Anyway, Mikos tries to ride off on the bike, it seems, when he's suddenly knocked down by a car. A car which just happens to be driven by Catch's father. The biker, who had been knocked down by Mikos, heads over to check on him, when Mikos' powers comes back into action, and he gets up almost immediately, strangling the man to death. Catch's father returns home to receive the news about what had happened earlier in the day with Mikos seemingly dropping dead at their door. He's clearly shaken up as he heads into a room alone and starts pouring himself some hard booze, probably because he's just realised that he's committed a serious felony and he will probably be going to jail. His wife joins, suggesting they spend the night alone, but with this being a horror film, they don't find staying at the house after some madman's guts were spilled out on their doorstep to be a smart decision, and decide to go about their night as they usually planned, making sure that the babysitter that they hired makes her way. It's at this point in the film where we get a proper introduction to one of the most annoying children I've ever seen in the film. Needless to say, I will not be rooting for him for the rest of the movie.
It can't be. No, you know that.
That's simply not true, my love. We did decide on a policy of forgive and forget, didn't we?
You did. No, I can't. If you're thinking of what went on, yes, I can forgive that. Only, how does one forgive the future?
One doesn't think about the future, my love. One lets it come in order to see what it may bring. I know you love me, and you know it too.
Hey, put that back on. Give me that.
Willie, quit that.
Catch's father comes to have a word with her before leaving, clearly nervous and shaken up, again failing to admit that he's just committed a serious crime, and is just acting like he's had a bad day at work. We then go to the part of the film that makes me wonder how much time they had Edmund Badam for this movie, and how much money he was being paid, as we get the first of many pointless Edmund Badam driving scenes that add absolutely nothing to the film, other than showing the priest looking lost and confused. Part of me honestly wonders whether they were just filming him making his way to the set and decided to use it as part of the movie. Catch's parents leave to go and enjoy the football game at their friend's house, opting to take the mother's car and leaving the dad's car parked outside. The mother seems hesitant, but the father just wants to go because he's ready for some football. We then get a really weird sequence in the forest. We're following the babysitter Emily making her way to the house through the forests. Now, I realize this scene is supposed to build tension and make us think that Mikos is following her, but the choice of music they made, well, just listen, you can't make this up. That has got to be the funkiest serial killer music I have ever heard. It sounds more like Shaft is going to pop out from around the corner, not some blood-crazed killer. Everybody arrives at the friend's house for what looks to be the stuffiest looking Super Bowl party you'll ever see in your life. I don't know about you, but when I watch the Super Bowl, I don't do it wearing a suit and tie. Mikos eventually ends up outside the family house, stopping as he recognizes the car that had hit him earlier. Not sure whether he just wants to get revenge, or the sight of the car triggers his mad violent rage. However, it's enough to make Mikos start stalking the house. And this is where the film starts getting into Halloween territory. Peggy, the girl that's waiting for the babysitter to arrive, even warns the children about a boogeyman.
Please, quit that sniffling or the boogeyman will be getting you.
It's not true. Mommy says there is no boogeyman.
Oh, no? And who do you think that was we saw before? And you can't be sure he won't come back. You'd better get into that bed and hide your face under the covers. Because if you can't see him, he can't see you.
What will he do if he does see me?
He'll eat you.
It's all build up from here for the next couple of minutes. The family dog is groaning and growling at the door. The phone rings before Peggy can answer the door, only to find out it's the mother asking about the children. Peggy then returns her attention back to the dog, who runs off as she opens the door, and she's then hit out of nowhere with what I think is an axe of some sort. I couldn't really tell what the weapon was due to the video quality. I'm not sure whether that was just degrading over time or whether that was the initial quality of the video, because this is shot in the dark, to be fair. Either way, it's not as gruesome as some of the earlier killings, but still very blunt and to the point. The police come across the scene of the murdered biker who'd been left hanging upside down and mutilated from Mikos' attack. We don't actually see the full extent of what Mikos did after the strangulation earlier in the film, so we're sort of left to wonder what he did. The effects don't look all too good though in the reveal of the body. Seems like it was lazily put together. The babysitter finally arrives at the house to find the door open. Peggy has disappeared, and with nobody knowing what's happened to her, they assume she got impatient and left. It's during this point we get a very weird jump scare from the annoying brat in the red sweater.
You little brat.
We get an update of what's going on at the Super Bowl party, showing actual footage from an NFL game on the TV. Not quite sure the legality of the film doing this at the time, as I'm pretty sure the NFL cracks down on stuff like that. But worrying about who owns rights to what wasn't something that Italian exploitation filmmakers considered at this time. Edmund Perdam pulls over momentarily to talk with the detective, getting an update on the situation. Perdam then drives back off looking disheveled and disappointed himself, going back on his endless adventure. Back to the children and Emily. They seem concerned and confused about where Peggy went, but the children think she ran off because she was angry. They shrug it off and go watch the football game. Peggy gets a long expository phone call where she's told everything that we already know as the audience. I think we're supposed to feel sorry for her because she knew the nurse that was murdered earlier in the film, but up until that funkadelic forest walk, I honestly don't remember seeing this woman in the film. Maybe she showed up and I just wasn't paying attention, but the phone call seems to serve very little purpose to me anyway, because again, we already knew everything that this woman was told over the phone. We get more confused Edmund Perdam car scenes, and I just swear the man must have been at the set for like 2 days, because a lot of the rest of this film is just him sitting in the car. Back at the house, annoying sweater kid goes looking for the family dog. It's here where it's revealed that Mikos has gotten into the house as his hand reaches out to grab the kid. Now, somehow, someway, he manages to escape and runs into Katya's room, warning the two that the boogeyman was in the house. The two, thinking that it's another one of his pranks, don't believe him, but Peggy goes to check to try and comfort him. Peggy looks around and there's no sign of Mikos when the lights suddenly go out in the house. We then go back to the Super Bowl party, where Katya's dad finally reveals why it is he's been so nervous and shaking up, saying that he'd run over a man earlier in the night and did absolutely nothing to help. And somehow going to a Super Bowl party was magically going to make him feel better about that. Emily discovers what happened to Peggy as she returns light to the house and immediately does her best to try and protect the children. She discovers the phone lines have been cut and tells Sweater Kid to run and get his parents from the Super Bowl party, or at the very least go as far away as he could to get some help. She then rushes into Katya's room to protect her until somebody comes to save them. To do this, she takes advantage of Mikos's one weakness, a couch propped against the door. In all fairness, the couch actually seems to be doing its job as Mikos bangs at the door. When all of a sudden, stupid sweater kid, instead of running to get help, crawls back into the house to get in on the action. Because, you know, the first thing to do when there's a killer in your house is make sure you're inside. With Sweater Kid back in the house, Mikos turns his attention to the kid. Not wanting him to get hurt, Emily grabs herself a pair of scissors and chases Mikos down to try and save Sweater Kid before he gets hurt. But once again, the child just shows how annoying and useless he really is. Mikos drags Emily into the kitchen for another death scene I'm sure the British government were eager to send into purgatory. Again, the film is very dated, and while the effects can still be respected, you can tell that the actress that's playing Emily has just had a lot of black makeup smeared on her face to make her look burnt. It's still a very disturbing scene, however, as the camera lingers on the struggle that Emily puts up as her head is forced into the oven. She does manage to get out and get some leverage against Miko before she's put down for good, trying to no avail to use the scissors against him, as they're quickly turned against her and shoved into her neck. Sweater Kid finally follows Emily's advice and runs off for help, something he should have done when she first asked him to do it. Back at the party, the parents discuss the ramifications of the hit-and-run incident. They notice the lights have been turned on back at the house and decide to try and call. Meanwhile, Katya is doing her best to release herself from the setup she's in within her bed. Doing this, however, she attracts the attention of Mikos and makes a quick struggle to try and beat her paralysis and force herself back onto her feet. From this point on, Katya is the most effective character in the film. In what I can only imagine was ripped off from The Shining, Mikos rips through the door and grabs a hold of Katya's hair. Katya stabs Mikos in the eye with a compass, blinding him and forcing him to use his hearing to now decipher where she is in the room. Katya tries her best to move silently out of Mikos' grasp, and to throw him off the scent, plays a radio and makes a run for it. The chase through the house is actually quite dramatic and well done, I think, for the kind of movie that this is anyway. Every step Katya takes is one made with struggle and seeming agony, and she's gotten up for the first time in the entire movie. If she were to just move along as if nothing had happened, then it wouldn't be very effective. She knows she can't outrun the monster, so she's trying her best to outwit him. It's actually really quite smart. Meanwhile, Sweater Kid finally gets some help, as he stops Edmund Padam, most likely trying to make his way to his next movie, and reminds him that he needs to finish this one first. Back in the house, Katya and Mikos are circling each other slowly. The tension is actually built quite well here with the music from the radio playing in the background. Just when you think Katya's going to slip free, Mikos grabs a hold of her and the struggle begins. Edmund Pradam actually shows up towards the end, which drives Mikos to put Katya down as he hears the priest's voice. The priest tries to end Mikos with a gun, but fails as Mikos manages to finally get his hands on the priest and starts to strangle him. Katya, using the distraction to her advantage, grabs a hold of a medieval axe and starts swinging madly at Mikos' head multiple times, eventually decapitating and killing him. The end of the film finally reaches as the police show up conveniently after doing literally nothing the entire film. The parents are back from the Super Bowl party, and Sweater Kid is back acting like they had a fun time at the park. Katya emerges from the house, and folks, what you are about to see may just be the best ending ever.
The boogeyman.
What is it? Katya. Oh, God. Look, Willie, you don't need to be afraid anymore.
You have no idea how many times I've watched that ending. I mean, I could watch that over and over and over again. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's perfect. The the girl that started off paralyzed at the beginning of the movie became the most effective, most important character in the entire film, and at the end tells her brother she doesn't need to be afraid anymore, and immediately pulls up a severed head. I mean, it was just brilliant, just genius. In conclusion, this movie, it's harmless, honestly. I mean, it borrows and it rips off a little bit from Halloween and some other slasher films, but what horror films weren't ripping off Halloween at this time, honestly? What slasher films were not ripping off Halloween at this time? That was the formula at this time in the 1980s, and for an Italian exploitation film, ripping off Halloween isn't exactly a shocking thing. On its own merits, the film has some decent effects here and there, some good tension building towards the end between Katya and the monster, but just some really weird, silly decisions. Edmund Perdam in the car, I really don't know what that was all about. The biker gang, I think that was just there to set up a kill. The kid was just... The kid in the red sweater, oh my god, he was just so annoying and useless. I mean, if he hadn't... Why do you climb back into a room where you know a serial killer is in there? It just makes no sense. And then, of course, you had the useless police officers, but that's standard and stereotypical in a slasher film. Honestly, this is a neat little independent movie. This is what this is. It's a completely... I mean, you can say the drill scene with the nurse. You can definitely say that the saw blade scene with the janitor was a little over the top, if not very over the top. And I can see why some people might have been disturbed by the oven scene with Emily, because they're long, lingering close-up shots, and the effects, again, for the time, I think, were quite decent. But again, you know that they're fake, and honestly, who's going to look at this and be inspired by any of this, out of any normal, sane human being? This is not going to influence anybody of sound, reasoning, and mind. This film is one of the few on the Video Nasties list which hasn't been re-released in the United Kingdom. I don't know whether that's because of the rarity of the film. I heard there's something like 5 VHS tapes of the original VHS tapes anyway, not counting copies and bootlegs, obviously, that actually exist out there. And the money that you're going to be paying, if you find one of these, if you find a collector that's willing to separate with one of these, good luck. If you really want to collect them, getting an original VHS tape of this is just practically impossible. Getting a DVD of this thing is a bitch. On eBay, a DVD, I got it cheaper, but I looked online, and a DVD on eBay under the French title Horrible, £60. £60 for a DVD of this, that's insane. It's one of the rarer ones because of the incineration. I mean, only 5 VHS tapes, that's because the British government tried to destroy every single tape they could find, and this film didn't deserve that. I mean, there's a lot worse films on the list that I've seen, or that I've heard of. This isn't one of them. This would have been forgotten within 2 years. This is the one that you pop in, you watch once, you have a good laugh, you are amazed at the ending, and then you just sort of forget about it, and maybe you pop it in like a year or two later down the line, and oh yeah, this weird film, the one where the girl holds up the severed head. Other than that, it's completely harmless. It had no right to be banned. It had no right to be incinerated. That ultimate form of censorship. Completely no right to be treated like that. This film had a right to exist. Maybe we'd have just passed it off as a Halloween ripoff if people weren't panicking over it. Who knows? But personally, I like it. And if you can get your hands on an original VHS tape, again, good luck. You're going to be paying $500 was the last I heard for that amount, for that VHS tape, for the original VHS tape. For a copy or a bootleg, I don't know. It's if you can find a copy or a bootleg of it, if you really want to get a VHS tape. But again, you can find it under DVDs. The alternate titles that you might be able to find it off, I'll list those off again. You can find it either under Anthropophagus 2. It may have the subtitle of Monster Hunter if it is under Anthropophagus 2. It may just be known as Monster Hunter. It may also be known as Zombie 6 Monster Hunter. So there's a few alternate titles. Oh, and Horrible, which is the one that I found on eBay. Yeah, it's unfortunate that this was it's still not been re-released in the UK. 2016. And a lot of the films have been re-released. Some haven't, and this is one of them, and I don't see why. I really don't see why.